Hannah, you wear a lot of hats. You're an activist, you are an advocate, you're an angel investor, and you're also very active on social media. But the underlying theme for all of these roles is a focus on women's health. So my first question to you is, how do you choose which issues and topics to bring up on all of these different platforms?
That's a great question. I mean, it's interesting because sometimes it feels like everything is urgent, but some things are more urgent than others. And then there are narratives that just continuously need to be talked about throughout the year. And right now, particularly, I've been talking a lot about reproductive health and our rights and our freedoms. You know, the mortality rates that are happening with the Black maternal health crisis. But I think really, overall, women's health is just something that seems to be what everyone wants to talk about without really putting a lot of action into place, or education, or resources, or money. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. As someone who has like grown up in New York City in a very privileged environment, and you know, having access to holistic modalities at a young age. My mom was like, had me in the room when she was doing acupuncture at 7 years old. That's certainly not the way it looks for the rest of the country, and it's just getting worse without sounding super pessimistic.
And something you just said, yeah, women's health is part of the conversation now. People are really excited about it. But how do you feel like that squares with what you view as the most important issues? In other words, do you think the buzziest topics are also the most important right now?
Actually, I think that it's crazy, but reproductive health is, I think it's not even in the top 3 of what people are caring about in terms of the election, which is really hard to swallow. Because it just feels like the secret here is that America hates women. And that obviously, you know, I think we need to show out in huge amounts of votes and communities to really show everyone what the power of women can do. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the buzziest thing is what people, or like, I think your question was the buzziest thing is not at the top of the ticket.
Yeah. I want to jump to another hat that you wear, which is mother. Can you share how your own journey with fertility and pregnancy and childbirth has really shaped your work?
Yeah, well, first of all, I will say that I gave birth with Ula. You just heard from her, the CEO of Ula.
Small world.
They were absolutely amazing. Sorry, the question was, how does that shape?
Your whole experience. You've been open about you've used IVF.
Yes.
How has that shaped your work journey?
Sure. So when I first kind of went down the road of wanting to become a mom, I realized very quickly, about 6-7 months into my journey of trying to become pregnant, that something was off. So I ended up going through IVF, and that was like almost about a 2.5 year journey of coming to the conclusion of going through IVF. And just when you go through life experiences, and when you also choose to live your life on the internet, you know, you end up opening up about things that maybe you never thought you'd talk about. You know, that was a really lonely experience, and it felt like at the time people weren't really talking about it.
Right.
And also, you know, there was pregnancy loss, there was, you know, hormones, shots, the waiting room, just like aspects of the journey that I felt like I didn't need to own alone. And it's weird because a lot of my friends weren't necessarily going through that in their lives, so it almost felt more comforting to tell strangers and like a community on the internet than it did to even talk to my friends who didn't necessarily get it. And when understanding that world of fertility, infertility, and you know, giving birth, you know, the care system, the Black maternal health crisis we're dealing with, like all of these things became very much things that I cared about. And so not only did I start advocating for those areas online, but then I also have invested a lot into the maternal health care space. I think I've done about 7 or 8 investments within the maternal health space.
So I'm guessing as you went through this process yourself, you probably learned a lot. I'm sure you learned a lot, right?
So much.
That maybe your average person doesn't know about. So like, what do you think are some of the biggest things you want society writ large to learn, to know about this fertility process in IVF that that maybe the average person probably doesn't know?
That's a good question. I mean, well, fertility treatments themselves are obviously very expensive, and so, any way to help democratize access to IVF is really important. I invested in a company called Kindbody. There are lots of companies like Maven that are doing things to, create better benefits for those who still work in corporate environments, which
we are going to talk about.
What?
We're going to get to that.
Okay,
yes,
okay,
yes.
So I won't go too far there. And then, I will say, like 50% of pregnancies are unplanned. So imagine, 50% are unplanned. The other half, I feel like, take a lot of hard work. And I think that what I would tell people is, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, because this is an area of medicine that still feels very disconnected to any sort of like layman's terms. And that can be really overwhelming, like the things that your doctor is telling you, or and everyone has such a personal baseline of what they're dealing with. And so it's really important to be able to advocate for yourself, do your own research, and make sure you're comfortable with your care team. I tell a lot of my friends who are looking for recommendations, why don't I introduce you to 3 different people and you go have a conversation with all 3 of them. And they're like, well, why would I need to go to all 3 if like you loved the person you were with? I said, well, I loved the person I was with, but you might not love that person. And I think it's really important that you feel supported in your journey, because it's something that's a real mental journey as well. And so if you don't feel that you have the right care team, sometimes I feel like, that can impact your outcome, because stress is a factor in all of this.
Right. And so we touched a little bit on your work with Vice President Harris's campaign and just your general advocacy for reproductive freedoms. It's hard to remember. I think we can safely say this is the most prominent that reproductive rights have been in the political discussion ever, maybe.
Yeah.
And I also think of the topic of just in general having children has come up a lot on the campaign trail. So how would you rate the quality of this kind of national political conversation we're having about reproductive health and the decision to have children at all?
Oh my goodness. Well, to rate
are we talking about the right stuff? Is the conversation smart? Is it helpful?
No, it's not. It's not. It's all fear. It feels like it's all fear mongering. It feels like we are still dealing with the most antiquated, versions of womanhood. And I think that, people are confused by the idea of reproductive care being basic health care. This is much bigger than abortion. And I think people are, using abortion in this politicized way when, first of all, we don't even, at this point, it feels like we don't even really care about, Black women who give birth, women who give birth who are not supported in their workplace. There's no national paid leave. We are literally, that's so embarrassing for the United States. I don't understand how we got here, honestly. So I think people are definitely talking about the wrong things, and I am surprised. I'm actually not surprised, but I am every day horrified by the things I see online from, all sorts of different backgrounds, ethnicities, socioeconomic groups, who believe those narratives.
So I think we're going to move a little bit more onto the investor side of things, but I do want to talk about benefits. I think that over the past few years, we've seen employers become more conscious of the need to be more thoughtful about women's health. So before we get into what that exactly looks like, how do you think employers should be thinking about this?
I think employers should be giving women whatever they want in order to keep them in the workplace and happy. Like, it doesn't seem like a crazy idea to me, but I just was talking to a friend the other day who just had her third baby. She works at Blackstone, and they want them to come. They want her to come back to work 4 days a week, and I think it's been like 3 months. She's like, no, I'm not doing that. So she's leaving her job. Right. And I think that if we don't really put women first, and even with these abortion bans, we are gonna see women leave their jobs, leave their state to go to places where they have better care, and that is going to make a huge impact on the economy. And I don't think people understand how the two go hand in hand. Like, it's baffling to me.
And so just forget about benefits for a second, and maybe you're hitting at this a little bit, but there's also culture, right? I think just the way that we handle and approach caregiving responsibilities. Like, what can employers be doing to support women more in that capacity?
Well, they should be giving paternal leave as well, or whatever for your partner. I think that our care system has a really long. They've failed in so many different ways, and I think that the postpartum care model is non-existent. That's from a maternal standpoint, a mental standpoint, physical standpoint, having, even just like the conversation around formula. Like, why is this conversation still so polarizing in 2024? Women have to go back to work. Most women have to go back to work 2 weeks after giving birth. And you expect that person to breastfeed their child for 6 months? Make it make sense. Like, it's just crazy to me that we put these huge emphasis on how we're supposed to show up, and then also be, the super mom and the boss at work, and when people are just trying to literally make sure that they can, heal properly. Right. I mean, women are still in diapers 2 weeks after giving birth. And if you had a vaginal birth, if you had a C-section, please do not stand up for at least 2 weeks. Like, it's crazy that we don't understand how this works, and that it's reflected not only in the workplace, but also the lack of care. And
Right. And all of this takes a mental burden. I know you've talked about mental health. For the sake of time, I'm going to ask only one question about mental health, but as someone who lives their life online, you're very online, what kind of boundaries do you have, in this age of social media where we talk about how harmful it can be to your mental health? How do you approach that yourself as you do all this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I luckily am someone who is not obsessed with my phone. I could literally, I think that's what the running joke is with all of my friends, is like I could leave my phone in a room and like it would be a day later and I'd be like, oh my God, where's my phone? People were like,
that's healthy.
What? But I think that's also just particularly the time that I grew up in. I'm a millennial, we didn't even have social media until we were in college. It's just a different thing. I did certainly not grow up as a child with a cell phone. Mm-hmm. And so that I think is really different. And I think that the younger generations who are dealing with all of the anxiety and comparison and mental health issues.
Disproportionately girls.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. I think it's really, really difficult. And I think if we don't start making some serious changes in school, and I mean, Instagram just put out teen accounts, so that way parents have to opt in if your teen is going to be on Instagram. I think that Google, Apple, TikTok should follow suit. I mean, I think that there needs to be more boundaries in place. And I think for me personally, I try to be very specific around the content that I make. Mm-hmm. And gone are the days, I'm a mom now, gone are the days of me sharing 15 stories in a day, talking to camera. Like, I'm lucky if I can get a post up with like some writing on it that is like really thought out, because my time is just different now. I do feel like I'm spread a bit thin, and I'm working on my own personal boundaries of where I need to be spending my time. But Instagram is really just a small glimpse into my life, and I try to share the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I think it's really important to just understand that Instagram is Instagram we know is a glossy place for most people, and it's nice to be real and authentic.
Yeah. Well, this went way too fast, and unfortunately we're out of time. But Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.